Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I'm so honored to be here this morning. So I always joke whenever they read those introductions, and I'm like, where is she? Where's the person on paper? I want to meet the person on paper. So I always joke with my children. I tell my children, so it's kind of like imposter syndrome. So we can get stuck and we can get held up sometimes by imposter syndrome, which is where we have this incredible, history, our story, our accomplishments of our things that we've gone through in our life. And then we look around the room and we feel like we don't match that kind of person that we've become. So I want to share a little bit this morning of my personal journey and how I became where and who I am today. If you guys will take note on the slide, we can just leave it up for a few minutes. The importance of smaller steps. And I think that's a big key, because when we start off, we all start off. I mean, I've been here almost 5 decades. So when we start off, especially as younger folks, we always want to take those giant steps. When we make changes to our schedule, our daily life, we come in and say, oh, starting Monday, I'm going to eat good. I'm going to go to bed early. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to exercise all before 4 o'clock in the morning. And the reality is that's not how we function. And that's certainly not how we succeed. It's not by large steps. It's by small steps. So some of my small steps that have led, you guys can pull that down. I don't know if you can still see me or not. Some of the small steps that have led me, to where I am today, it didn't always sound like it looks on paper. It didn't always look the way it sounds. I was born, I was actually a black market baby. So, which means back in the 70s, if somebody couldn't have a child, they would usually buy them from another country. So my parents purchased me, and my birth certificate was forged, which in later years is when I learned all this. My birth certificate was forged, and off we go, the happy, 3-person family. My dad passed away when I was 3. I had never had the opportunity to meet him. And my mom, it was just my mom and I, and they were much older. They were in their 60s whenever they purchased me. So, you can imagine how, that kind of played out as far as growing up as a child. When I was 14, she passed away of a massive stroke. So when she passed away, I became what they call a ward of the state. And I went into an orphanage. Back then, you just didn't adopt teenagers. They were just seen as trouble. I don't know. I have 2 right now. Maybe they still are. But so I wasn't adoptable, but I did go into the orphanage. And that's when they discovered my birth certificate was forged, how I had been in school and never had vaccinations, and everything was kind of beyond everybody. So the judge ruled that I would remain in the United States. To this day, I'm still fighting for my passport. So hopefully they will see me as, I speak one language, and here I am. I went through the orphanage, and it was not a pleasant experience. And I wanted out of there probably just as much as, as a young person to get married or to have success. I just wanted to be gone. It was not pleasant. The great thing and the good thing, and we always look for those silver linings, are, some things that came out of it was that I learned to be very self-driven and very, I just would say self-driven. And survivor mode, as some people would call it. So I graduated high school early because one of the good things, the silver linings that came out, was the state would pay for your college if you went through their program, which was you graduate, you go to college, and there was no interruption. There was no break in between. You just go all the way through. So I graduated high school mid-year, right for the Christmas break and the winter break, and went off to Texas A&M. I was 16 years old. And talk about being thrown into just a shock of culture. I was, not used to the whole party scene and all of that. So I didn't partake in that. And I just wanted something different. Right as I was getting ready to graduate, they had these volunteers called CASA. And my CASA worker, her name was Arlene, and she would come and pick me up from school. She took me to my first McDonald's. I had never eaten out. She took me to my first nice restaurant where I was exposed to there was more than one fork. And what do I do with it? And so she was very kind to me. Well, she picked me up late one day. And when she picked me up, she was in this cute tennis outfit. Well, being super poor, not knowing, until I went to the orphanage, sometimes there was no dinner and things like that. I had never seen such a cute outfit. I didn't understand, wow, what is this that you have on? I just idolized the daylights out of her. And she had to go by her house so she could change clothes. And when we went to her house, it was the first brick and mortar house I had ever seen. And I went inside, it was clean and it smelled good and she had beautiful things. And I remember I learned what an ottoman was that day. So I was sitting on this ottoman waiting for her to change. And she came out and I just looked at her and I said, "Can I have this?" And she looked at me, I'll never forget. And she took my little cheeks and she said, "You put your head down and you go to school and you leave this town and you never come back." And that stuck with me. So that's exactly what I did. Now, years later, realizing and looking back and going back to that little town, her house was worth about $48,000. So for me, that was a mansion. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. So off I go to college. I go straight through. There was no winter breaks or summer breaks. I did just like the state said. I don't know if they set you up for success or failure, because there is no break. If you break, then they stop paying for the school. And most kids like to go home or go do something during the interim. Well, what it did is it put me on the trajectory of, I graduated with my master's degree in psychology when I was 21. So remember, at this point, I had never worked because there was no break. I graduate, off I go to the big city. And I knew from doing my clinicals that summer that there was no way that I was going to do anything with that psychology degree. I volunteered at mental retardation for the graveyard shift, and it about kicked my tail. That is a very hard shift. Because I would finish work at 7 a.m. in the morning, and then I would go straight into class. And so I would sleep sometime in my car in the afternoon. It was just not a pleasant time. So I graduate and I drive through this city called Dallas, Texas, and it was at night. And I saw the skyline from I-635, and it was the most magnificent thing, even to this day, that I believe I've seen. It was lit up like a Christmas tree, so many lights, and it just looked so beautiful. And I said, when I graduate, I'm going to move here. And I did. I graduated, I moved there. Well, part of the program is they give you a $6,000 check. And if you complete the program, and all of your stuff in a trash bag. So here I am with my $6,000 check, my stuff in a trash bag. I had a car that had been donated to me. How it ever made it driving around is beyond me. I mean, the back doors didn't open. The passenger seat was broken and laid down. It didn't ever set up. The windows didn't roll down, but hey, it had wheels and it got me places. So I moved to Dallas, Texas, and I rent this apartment. They want a check. I'm like, well, I have this is what I have. They said, well, you can go, and my food card from the university wouldn't help at all. I'm like, I should have had more food, because I didn't get to take it with me. So they told me about a check cashing place across the street. I go, I cash the check, I pay for my rent for the year. Well, now I got to get a job because I've got this cash, but it's going to run out. I can see I have enough wits about me that it's going to run out. So back then we answered jobs in the newspaper. It wasn't, this internet and all of these, techie things. So I answered an ad in the newspaper. I drove into Century 21 and got, I sat there. Laura Berline interviewed me. And I remember walking out of there. She said, well, there's a 30-day training program. It's here in the office. You have to come. I was like, okay. I didn't ask about pay. I just assumed I got a job that would pay my bills. All was good. I went out of there and I celebrated, and I went and bought some cereal to celebrate. And I just remember feeling so happy that I got the job, and in my car I was celebrating I got the job. So I go in for training. It was 30 days. Well, a year later, I find out that 30 days was actually them training me to get my license. I thought it was what I had to do to work there. That's how naive I was. So if people look at you and say, well, you have your master's degree, you should have this about you. Nope. I thought I had a job and this was my training. I just took it at face value. I'm very literal. So finished my training, and now I get to go onto the sales floor. I'm thinking this is a promotion. So, and really it's just an ability, I would find out a year later, to go and collect commission if I could earn it. But I didn't see it that way because I didn't have the knowledge base. So I started doing what they said. They gave me a phone book and put me in the fishbowl. It was this big glass room. And they said, you're gonna call through the phone book. And when you get your first appointment, we'll give you the real leads. I said, okay, that's great. What do I say? They said, well, just tell them that you sell real estate and see if they want to do anything. Folks, that was my script. I would call them, say, hi, my name is Anna with Century 21. Do you know anybody who wants to buy or sell? No. Okay, click, pick it up and do it again. I never made it through A before I got my first appointment. And I went out there, and I think I was there for 6 hours because I had no clue what I was doing. And I think the poor people, it was Bob and Jolene Oldenburg. I believe they just hired me to take pity and mercy upon me. It was in a great market though. So they hired me and I sold it that weekend, which meant, and it was a cash buyer. That never happens in real estate. It's very rare. Let's put it that way. Especially when you're brand new with piggy tails, low piggy tails. Cause I was young, I'm 21. I got my low piggy tails out there. And so I had a closing. So I didn't have to go very long. So the realization and the levity of the situation I had put myself in had not occurred. So I made a commission check, and whenever you're 21 and you're used to being broke and poor, you get a commission check for 20,000 or so. That's a lot of money. And that was my paycheck. And all I wanted to do, and I remember my office manager, Jeannie Dees, just celebrating with me. I had never had anybody celebrate with me. And I worked my tail off for that year so that she would come and celebrate with me in my cubicle. By the way, I earned a cubicle. I was no longer in the fishbowl. Again, I got a promotion. So I'm in my cubicle and I'm working my tail off, and it's the end of the year. I've sold 104 houses because I wanted to make Jeannie Dees proud. I cannot tell you the power it had when she would come by and high-five me. And she would always high-five me and say, do it again. Yes, ma'am. And I would go out and do it again. So at the end of the year, this man comes in that they bring into our sales meeting, and he's talking about taxes and filing your taxes and write-offs. It was completely over my head. I had no clue what he was talking about. And I go to Jeannie Dees and I say, Jeannie, I'm lost. I don't understand. And she goes, well, your taxes, you set aside your taxes, right? And I said, I don't even know what taxes are. I don't understand. And her countenance fell because I had sold 104 houses. So that's a lot of money. And she just looked at me and she goes, please don't tell me you've spent all that commission. And I was like, what's commission? And she goes, the money that you've been earning. And I mean, at this moment, you could have probably heard a Kleenex drop in that room, because she was just dead serious and silent, because she knew the predicament that could possibly be happening. And I just looked at her and I said, oh, you mean all of those checks? And she said, yes. And I said, no, I still have them. She goes, what do you mean you still have them? I said, well, I'm still living off of my $6,000 that the state gave me whenever I graduated. I said, I still have all those commission things that you're calling them. Again, 21 with a master's degree, commission, it hadn't registered. And she goes, well, where are they? And I said, oh, they're in a shoebox at home. Because I treated myself when I started my career, because Jeannie Dees told me to stop wearing my hair in pigtails, get a suit, and get some nice shoes, stop wearing my Birkenstocks. So I did. And so I had a shoebox. And she said, go get them and bring them here. She told me, she goes, I don't understand. So I go home, I get my shoebox, I bring it in, I hand it to her. She opens it up, and there's all these checks in there. And she just looked at me, and she just started laughing and crying at the same time. She was laughing at my just naivety and just flat out dumbness, to be honest. And she was crying because it was so funny, and she was so relieved that I hadn't spent it. And she goes, well, you need to go open a bank account. And I said, okay, how do I do that? She walked me across the hallway. I went in, the bank man, it was Landmark Bank, and they loved me. We had to get a few checks reissued. I deposited a lot of money that day. He taught me with her there how to write a check, how to balance a checkbook. Again, I got my degree, and nobody had told me this before. It's not something that was taught in school. So fast forward years later, I figured out the whole commission thing. If I had to do it again today, I don't know if I would have the courage to go back and say, I'm going to take 100% commission job and it's going to somehow work out and pay my bills. I fell into that because I thought I had a job. So one of the things that, I want us to take a look at, because we all have a story, and, and it's funny, and it wasn't always funny, eating potatoes and ramen kind of got old for a while, but it's what I did in college. So it's what I did as that first year in real estate. So, we all have a story, and what I don't want any of us to ever do, and what I try my best not to do, is don't heroize, heroize, I'll make it a word. Don't heroize somebody, because when we do that, it just says they're special and I'm not. And if they're special, that means they have some qualities or some attributes that I don't have. So therefore, that's my excuse of why I can't succeed. So don't heroize or look at this story. I've been called a lot of things when I share some of my story, oh, you're a success, or, oh, you're a survivor, because just because I made all that money didn't mean my life got easy. It just means now I had money to create some problems. and that I did. I sold real estate for 9 years. I bought a brokerage, realized that I was going to fail if I didn't start, recruiting people. So I did that. I loved what I did. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it's not the way that anybody wants to, to go down that road. But to this day, I'm grateful that I did. It caused me to, it shifted me. It moved me forward, because I was happily I was the biggest kid in the room, and I couldn't be anymore. And so in my higher power, for me, is God. God came in and was like, let me shift your environment a little bit, because I still have more to do with you. So I survived that. I sold my brokerage, and I decided that I wanted to have a family, but, I was not focused on dating. So I went way backwards and way different, but I had money. And so I went and did in vitro. I had all 3 of my children in vitro. And when my youngest, she's 5 now, when my youngest was 9 months old, we were in church. And this man, during the whole shaking your hands and meet and greet time, he shook my hand and he said, would you like to go eat? And I just looked sometime. He goes, would you like to go get something to eat sometime? And I just looked at him and said, I have kids. And he goes, I'm pretty sure people with kids get hungry too. And I was like, okay. So, and he was what I prayed for. I had a very tall order from God. I requested somebody, very specific, and God delivered. It just wasn't in my timing. It was 7 years after I asked, and an extra child after I asked. But we got married. We have a beautiful family, a beautiful life. And one of the things that when I'm talking to my children, or I look around and I see where I came from, sometimes our past doesn't define us. And if I would have let my past define me, I would never have become the mom that I am today, the wife, the Christian woman that I am today, the leader, the influencer. I would have never become those things. So my past never defined me. But what it did do is it loud and clear, and this is the message I tell my children all the time, and that is, be the one. Each one of you have a circle of people that you influence in your life. And in mine, it was just my life. And I was the one that stood up and said, I'm changing the trajectory of what's going on. Now, was it intentional? It was not. I wish I could say I had that kind of foresight. I did not, but I was the one. I was the one that stood up and said, I don't want to be broke. I don't want to live in a house with dog poop and, everywhere, and cat feces. I don't want to go to bed at night and look forward to going to school so I can have lunch, because it was free lunch for poor kids. I was the one that stood up and said, I want something different. That day when I was in Erlene's house, and I asked her if I could have this. And it was clean, and it smelled good, and it was peaceful. And she had an impact. She was a difference maker. I was the one. She was the one for me. It only takes the one. So my message for you guys today, and hopefully some encouragement, is be the one. And if your life is too comfortable, then don't bring pain upon yourself by any means. I think we probably all had our fair share, but shift it around. See what needs to shift so that movement starts to happen in your life again, because sometimes we can become very still and stagnant. So Mark, thank you so much. Mark's fantastic. He is in our company, he does the diversity chair. So he co-chairs diversity and equity in our company, which is fantastic. What a better person. I don't think there is one. Because he has far arms to reach out, and he's got a lot of diverse beliefs and mindset that really serve the whole community. So I'm very honored to work alongside Mark, and I appreciate you guys letting me be here.